I have the distinct privilege and pleasure to introduce to you our guest speaker for the Business Forum, Mr. Tim Tassopoulos. Yes. Tim Tassopoulos is President and Chief Operating Officer of Chick-fil-A, Inc. He began his 40-year career at Chick-fil-A as an hourly restaurant team member and was appointed as President and Chief Operating Officer in 2016. He has served as Director of Field Operations, Vice President of Operations, Senior Vice President of Operations, and most recently, Executive Vice President of Operations. Tassopoulos graduated in 1981 as valedictorian, of course, of Oglethorpe University in Atlanta, Georgia, with a bachelor's degree in history and political science. He received his master's in business administration from Georgetown University in Washington, D.C. in 1983, where he was recognized with a Graduate School Service Award. Passionate about youth, education, and philanthropy, Tassopoulos serves on several academic and youth development boards. He is the board chair of the Board of Trustees of Oglethorpe University and chairman of the Board of Trustees for the Boys and Girls Clubs of Metro Atlanta. He also serves on the Board of Trustees for Toll Charitable Foundation and is a former member of the Board of Advisors at Georgetown University McDonough School of Business and the advisory board of the Atlanta Area Council for Boy Scouts of America. He formerly served on the Board of Trustees for Hellenic College and Holy Cross Greek Orthodox School of Theology. Tassopoulos is an active member of Holy Transfiguration Greek Orthodox Church in Marietta, Georgia. He is a former parish council member and taught high school catechism for over 35 years. Tassopoulos is an archon of the Ecumenical Patriarchate, Order of St. Andrew, an Archangel of Michael Honoree of the Metropolis of Atlanta, the 2017 Aristotle Award recipient from the Order of Ahapa, and the 2018 Hellenic Heritage Achievement Award recipient from the American Hellenic Institute. Tassopoulos is a native of Atlanta. He's married to Maria and has two sons, Luke and Nicholas. These are all the nice things that we have on paper and you can read in your document that I wanted to read. But more importantly, I wanted to tell you that I had the pleasure of meeting and spending time with Tim over the last 5 years while I was based in Atlanta. He's one of the nicest persons I've ever met. He's a role model for our youth, and most importantly, he is just a fantastic individual who lives the Greek or Hellenic Orthodox values that we so much support through Leadership 100, but he lives it on an everyday basis. I could not be more proud to call him my friend. Tim, please come up. Thank you very much.
Very sweet. Thank you. Jim is an adopted Atlantan after 5 years, and we love having him there. Your Eminence, Your Grace, Reverend Fathers, friends, thank you for the honor and privilege to be here. I really appreciate the invitation, but I have to admit from the very beginning, I'm actually not here by choice. It was an expectation because my dear beloved Bishop Sebastian, who was my parish priest in Holy Transfiguration for years, called me before Paulette did. And this is what happens when Bishop Sebastian calls you. You answer the phone and he says, "The answer is yes, now I'll tell you the question." So the answer was yes from the beginning. So thank you for the invitation, Your Grace. So I really am honored to be here. I'm so grateful to Leadership 100, not only for the invitation, but also for the support you give to so many activities, programs, and initiatives in our archdiocese. And as a son of Orthodox Church here in America, my parents, my in-laws, my siblings, their families, and my sons, who have all grown up in active ways in the church, I'm grateful to you for the support you give. So thank you. And also congratulations on all you've done. I do want to talk this afternoon about a very specific question. And it's a question that I think we all ask ourselves, all of us in this room, whether we're clergy, laity, professional, teachers, doctors, business people, at home, in the community, we all ask ourselves this question, but sometimes we don't actually acknowledge that we do. But I think the answer to this question and how we can apply it makes a really big difference in our profession, our ministry, and our lives. Now, what's the question? Well, I'm going to actually make you wait for a few minutes to answer the question, ask the question, because what I want to do is tell you a little bit about my story. I think it connects with a lot of you in your story, and it really sets up the asking of this question that I think is important to us. So a little bit of my story. I'm a native Atlantan, as Jim mentioned. My parents are sons and daughter of Greek immigrants, and these are my folks. And we were blessed. My parents, who again lived in Atlanta, lived to both be 99 years old. And so, yeah, terrific, right? So a couple of things about my folks. They helped us grow up in the life of the church. We were so blessed with their long life because our two sons that you see in this picture before my dad passed away, they had a chance to spend time with them and had the influence of those grandparents and my wife's parents in their life. It's so special. Now, a few other things about my family. This is my wife, Maria, and our two sons, Luke and Nicholas. Some of you know Maria. She's from Charlotte, North Carolina. And that's right. And you can see the southern expression of I've married up. That is very evident. But Maria grew up as the daughter of Greek immigrants, grew up in the life of the church in Charlotte. And our two sons are Luke and Nicholas. Luke just graduated from the University of Virginia last spring, had a master's of public policy, and is now serving in the U.S. Navy. He just completed officer candidate school, and he's training in San Diego. And if you get a chance to pray for him, this summer he'll be on the destroyer John Chafee out of Pearl Harbor. And so we're grateful for Luke to do that. And then also our younger son is Nicholas. He's a senior at Northwestern up in Chicago. And Nicholas studies theater and writing. And after he graduates in June, he's hoping to head to Los Angeles to get into film, both acting and writing. So we're excited about what Luke and Nicholas are doing. And I want you to just know a little bit about me, again, because I think it sets up this question that all of us want to ask. So, I did grow up in the life of the church. I mentioned my parents. My parents were actively involved in the life of the church. My dad was a pharmacist. My mom stayed home. We were kind of limited financially growing up, but there was nothing limited about our involvement in the life of the church. So, my mom, she was involved in social service at Tassopoulos for over 65 years. And yeah, I loved that. It was fantastic. So, some of my earliest memories of growing up in the life of the church was stuffing those brown grocery bags with food items and clothes to take to homeless shelters. For years, that was what my mom did. She also taught adult Sunday school. She taught Bible study before that was common. My dad was involved in stewardship in the parish council, but most importantly, my dad was the person who would find the newcomer at church. You probably have some of these folks in your parish. He would find the newcomer at church and he'd make a beeline to them to greet them. And when my dad passed away about 5 years ago at his funeral, scores of people said, "Your father was the first person that I met at this church." So they established this idea of serving the church and serving others. It was significant, and I've kept that up. As Jim mentioned some things that I've done. One of the things I've enjoyed the most about service in the church is actually serving by teaching Sunday school or catechism. And I'm in my 37th year teaching high school students. But here's the cool thing. I got to graduate because I just transitioned from teaching high school to young adults. So I feel like I just graduated, which is really a lot of fun. But I have grown up in the life of the church. And this idea of serving others is so powerful. And that's what I learned growing up at home. But it didn't stop there. It also went to when I went to work for Chick-fil-A. Now, it was mentioned that I've had a long career at Chick-fil-A, but I'll tell you a little bit about how it started. When I was 17 years old, a senior in high school, it was time for me to get a part-time job beyond just cutting grass, cleaning gutters. So I went to the mall to apply at Rich's Department Store. For those of us from Atlanta, Rich's Department Store is the legacy family department store in Atlanta. My mother had actually worked there in the 40s and 50s. So I went to Rich's to apply. The lady behind the counter took my application. She looked at me. She looked very disinterested, and she said, "We'll call you if we're interested." So I didn't have a very good feeling about it. So when you're 17 years old and you're a little dejected, what do? You go eat fast food lunch, right? So that's what I did. I went down the mall to eat at my favorite restaurant, which was already Chick-fil-A. And as I walked up to Chick-fil-A, whether it's divine providence or fate or whatever, there was a sign up in front of the Chick-fil-A restaurant in that mall that said, "Applications for employment accepted today." And I looked at that and I thought, I need a backup application because I don't know that I'm going to get that job at Rich's. So this is the 43rd year of my backup plan from Chick-fil-A. So I did start at Chick-fil-A at that moment, 17 years old, and I started out, I'm the one on the left. I did have more hair back then. I started at Chick-fil-A 17 years old, making sandwiches, cleaning tables, waiting on customers, and I loved serving customers. I found very quickly I loved also serving my teammates. And I thoroughly enjoyed my experience at Chick-fil-A. And I worked all through college on a part-time basis during school, and I worked full-time in the summer. I began to open new stores, what you see here in this picture. The folks in the tuxedo are part of our marketing team to celebrate a grand opening. And I just thoroughly loved the idea of serving. And I worked for Chick-fil-A, again, through college, graduate school, and now full-time afterwards. Now, why do I tell you about growing up in the life of the church, and why do I tell you about Chick-fil-A? Because I think, like those of us in this room, you're here for a reason. It's because we actually feel called to serve the church, to serve others. It's just so significant when we respond to that call to serve. I believe, though, that all of us have a question we ask while we're serving. And the question sometimes surfaces when you are stuffing those grocery bags to take to the homeless shelter, but half the people that said they were going to show up didn't show up. You guys know what I'm talking about? When your car's driving to the church for one more meeting that night and you feel like the car's on autopilot because it just seems like, here we go, one more meeting, and this question begins to surface. So you write another check and another check, or maybe actually at work, where you feel like you're serving at work and somebody else gets the promotion. I think this question surfaces for all of us. It does for me. It's, does my service really matter? And so even if you've grown up in the life of the church serving, even if your business or profession or ministry is all about service, I think we ask this question a lot. Now, I'm not asking this question to put a damper on what we do here, but I actually think we have to acknowledge the reality of this question and say with confidence, how do I know that my service really matters? And so what I want to do for the next few minutes is encourage and challenge you to acknowledge this question and then answer it with an affirmative yes. Our service really does matter. And the reason I believe this so strongly is that I see it when you serve in the marketplace, which I've learned from Chick-fil-A. I believe it when you serve in the community, even when others don't understand what you've done for them to serve them, and the impact it has in our own lives personally. So 3 ways I believe it confirms our service really matters. So the first one I learned at Chick-fil-A, that service really matters in the marketplace. I mentioned I was 17 years old when I started working at Chick-fil-A. My owner-operator, a gentleman named Gary, was terrific teaching me about hospitality and service. Here's what he said to us. This is great advice in hospitality. Find a way to say yes to the guest. Find a way to say yes to the guest. It was great. And so for me, years and years later, when I'm with team members like this, I try to teach them, find a way to say yes to the guest. But Gary did something else for me besides teaching me that principle. He introduced me to this gentleman. Some of you may have heard of this person. This is Truett Cathy. He is the founder, the chairman, the entrepreneur who originated Chick-fil-A. Now let me tell you a bit about his story and the influence he had on my life. So Truett, born in the Depression, rural Georgia, high school education, went to the military, came home, opened a diner in Atlanta near the airport in 1946. 24 hours a day, 6 days a week. That diner is still open today. It's the longest running restaurant in the state of Georgia. So Truett worked in that diner. In that diner, he actually created the Chick-fil-A sandwich in the 1960s. It was so popular in that diner that he opened a Chick-fil-A restaurant in a mall in 1967. And from that history to today, Truett, again, born in the Depression, this Horatio Alger story, he ultimately owned and operated the largest family-owned and operated restaurant business in the United States. And the thing that I love about that story is he did it with a commitment to biblical principles that were unshakable. That's why he's closed on Sunday, and all Chick-fil-A restaurants have closed on Sunday ever since. Now, my first personal time with Truett, when my operator introduced him to me, I met with him, and we spent about an hour together, and he asked me about school and family and those things. He invited me to be a summer intern, which I quickly said yes to. I was 19 years old. And then he said to me, I go to all our new store openings, like you saw in that picture. He said, sometimes Jeanette, his wife, she can't come with me. Will you travel with me to some of these openings? I was like, a chance to travel with the owner of the company I work for? I was like, absolutely. What I didn't know is we had this movie that we showed at every one of the grand openings, and it was those big heavy projectors. He wanted somebody to carry the projector, so I was happy to do that. But here's the cool thing about this. The first trip I took with Mr. Cathy, I'm 19 years old. We're opening a store in Cleveland, Ohio, Beechwood Place Mall, for those from Cleveland. And this is like Chick-fil-A was small. We were watching expenses, and so Truett and I shared a room. Now, here's a man who at that point was in his early 60s, and he said, before we're going to go to sleep, I want to do one thing, and I had no idea what he was going to say. He said, I want to just sit right here, and I want to know what I can pray for you. And so I told him about school and family things that were on my mind, and then he said, well, you know what, let's just kneel down right by the bed. So get the picture, right? 19-year-old teenager that the CEO of the company I'm working for is praying for me personally. So you can imagine the loyalty I feel to Truett, to his family, but I'll never be able to pay him back. I can only pay it forward. And so I talk about that experience a lot because I think it's a model of our service really matters. Now, I do think it translates into the marketplace because Truett went to, at one point, the Ritz-Carlton, had a great experience, and at the Ritz-Carlton, they said, my pleasure. And Truett asked the Ritz-Carlton leadership, would you be okay if I took my pleasure and brought it to Chick-fil-A? Of course, I'm sure they were like, what in the world would my pleasure do in a fast food restaurant? But Truett came back to Chick-fil-A, and he said, I want us to say my pleasure. When he first said it, we kind of scoffed at him. But then he kept saying over and over and over again, the power of repetition. And so we all started to say my pleasure. So if you come to a Chick-fil-A, if you say thank you, I hope the team members will say my pleasure, exactly. Other people have begun to pick it up, I think, from Chick-fil-A. But here's the power of that my pleasure. That my pleasure has led to a commitment to service that has really set the bar high. Where Chick-fil-A, and I'm not saying this out of pride, it's out of gratitude. Chick-fil-A, the last 5 years in a row, actually since the beginning of Chick-fil-A being involved in this measurement, the American Customer Satisfaction Index, which gets customer feedback to say who's got the best customer service in the United States of any business, 5 years in a row, Chick-fil-A's been number one. Now, again, I'm not saying that out of pride, I'm saying it out of gratitude, but when you think about Disney and Apple and Amazon and all those companies and Chick-fil-A's rated higher, I think it's a little unexpected that a fast food company is number one in customer service across all businesses in the U.S. But I think it relates to this idea, service really matters. And I think Truett embodied it, and he challenged us to do it, and I think it can make a difference in the marketplace as well. Now, where does that originate, this idea of service for Truett and for his family and for all of us at Chick-fil-A? We actually call our model of hospitality and service second mile service. And it comes right from Matthew 5:41. Christ, in the Sermon on the Mount, said, if you're asked to carry a pack 1 mile, take it 2 miles. And you know the setting of that, the context? The Roman centurions could ask any Israelite to carry their pack a mile, and Christ said, carry it 2 miles. And so we try to talk about that and live that out at Chick-fil-A. It also, this commitment to service, reflects our corporate purpose. Now, you'll see if you read this, and I'll make sure you can read this, that our corporate purpose says nothing about 1 million sandwiches sold. It doesn't say anything about the number of stores to open or countries to be in. But the big why for Chick-fil-A, our corporate purpose is to glorify God by being a faithful steward of all that's entrusted to us and have a positive influence on all who come in contact with Chick-fil-A. So, yeah, it's really motivating for us. So just think about the power of that. Our purpose is not to maximize shareholder value. Our purpose is to glorify God. And so we try to live that out each and every day and each and every week at Chick-fil-A. We always miss the mark, but that's our intent. And we think serving really makes a difference. And so whether it's my pleasure or an extra nugget sauce, whether it's changing a customer's flat tire in the drive-thru, which we want to get that changed as fast as possible, or maybe when it's raining and you got an umbrella that you help a customer to their car, or, and this happened just last Friday in Georgia, where a 17-year-old restaurant team member was cleaning up the dining room at night, and he went to a table and saw an envelope. Some of you may have heard this story. Saw an envelope filled with $900 in cash. And the team member took the envelope and went back to their team leader and said, we got to get this to this customer, whoever it was that left it. The good news is the receipt from the sale from dinner was in that envelope, so they called the customer. It was a single mom. She was beside herself in gratitude that she didn't lose that $900. Isn't that great? So service really matters in the marketplace. You don't get those kind of stories unless people understand service really matters. And so I'm convinced the answer to this question, does service really matter, is yes in the marketplace. Now, second, does service really matter in the community? I believe that the answer to that is yes too. Now, let me tell you about my own experience of this, because for so many of us, when we serve in the community and we're not sure who actually receives the fruit of our service. Sometimes you never know, but sometimes you can figure it out. So in 1977, I graduated from high school and I committed to Oglethorpe University. This is my alma mater. It's a small private college in Atlanta. My brother was already in Emory University, another private college in Atlanta. I was committed to Oglethorpe University, and 2 private tuitions for our family. My dad was a pharmacist. Again, my mom stayed home. It was a big stretch for us. So I knew I was working at Chick-fil-A, but I wasn't completely sure how we were going to pay for college. But I found out that Oglethorpe had a scholarship, and the scholarship was the J. Mac Robinson Scholarship. Now, let me tell you a little bit about Mac Robinson. Mac Robinson was the founder of the First National Bank of Atlanta, ultimately merged with Wachovia and Wells Fargo. So Mac Robinson's sort of an Atlanta business legend. The business school at Georgia State University is the Robinson School of Business, named for him. Well, Mac Robinson supported Oglethorpe, but it was personal for me, because the first year I got to Oglethorpe, I was the Mac Robinson Scholar, which meant my tuition was paid for. And I was fortunate, I was the Mac Robinson Scholar for all 4 years. Now, you can imagine my gratitude to Mac Robinson, right? That's how I went to college. But I'd never met Mac Robinson. I knew he was this legend of Atlanta business. But I just was so grateful, but I'd never had the chance to express that. But fast forward 30 years later, my dear friend in Atlanta, Peter Rooney, I was telling him this story, and he said, hey, you know, Mac Robinson loves Chick-fil-A. I'm like, really? He said, you know, he loves Chick-fil-A so much. He's friends with Mr. Cathy, but he loves Chick-fil-A so much that every Thursday at lunch, he's at Chick-fil-A at Chastain Square. He said, why don't you have lunch with him? I was like, this is terrific. So get the picture. Again, I went to college because of the generosity of Mac Robinson, and I'm standing in the lobby of a Chick-fil-A restaurant 30 years later as a Chick-fil-A executive, waiting with my Chick-fil-A name tag and my Chick-fil-A logo tie to tell the person who actually paid the way for me to go to college, for me to tell him thanks. Can you imagine the sense of gratitude? How do you think Mac Robinson felt? Well, he beamed when he came in. I was beaming when he got there. I got a chance to spend that time with him. It was overwhelming. And yes, I did pay for the sandwich, fries, and fresh squeezed lemonade, just to be really clear. But I was so grateful to him. And for me, this principle is so vivid in my life, and I think it's true for all of us. Our service really matters. When we serve in the community, we may not see that person that we've served. We may not even know who they are, but maybe 30 years later, it's going to surface. Or maybe it never surfaces, but it doesn't matter because our service really matters because it impacts people's lives like I know Mac Robinson's generosity impacted me. So I really do believe service really matters in the marketplace. I believe service really, really matters in the community to those we serve. And lastly, I think service really matters because every time we serve, it impacts our own heart. So just an example of this that's really personal for me. So a little over a year ago was the first week of December. Marie and I were at home early on a Saturday morning. Our boys, Luke and Nicholas, were still away at school. It was the first Saturday of the month of December. It was rainy, it was cold, it was gray, and Maria and I had committed to go work at the Atlanta Community Food Bank that Saturday morning. So, get the picture, right? Early Saturday morning, what goes in your head? It's cloudy, it's rainy, it's yucky. It's just me and Maria. It's like, they won't miss us, will they? We can reschedule, right? The question is really, does our service really matter? So I don't know, maybe guilt, maybe accountability, maybe Maria being the Maria that she is saying, let's do the right thing. So we get up, we go through the rain, we walk through the puddles, still not that happy about it. We get to the food bank, we walk in the door, and it's like, oh, that's why we do this stuff. Because we get a chance to fill boxes of food for people that it was abundantly clear from what the food bank told us. These are for families that unless we pack these boxes, don't eat over the holidays. And you know what? It changes our own heart when we serve. And so when we ask this question, does my service really matter? It does matter in the marketplace. It does matter to others, but also it grows our own heart. And so I just challenge and encourage all of us that serve to never forget it grows our own heart. So to wrap all this up, this idea of service really matters, I'm going to just leave you with this thought. And the thought is actually not my thought. This is not the Tassopoulos hypothesis of service, just to be clear. It's actually from St. Paul. And St. Paul told the church at Galatia, he told the Galatians, don't grow weary of doing good, because in due time you will reap the harvest. And so for all of you that have been involved in Leadership 100, for all of you and me that are involved in the life of the church, in our professions, in our homes, in our communities, don't grow weary of doing good. And so to you as Leadership 100, I just applaud you. I thank you. I congratulate you for not growing weary, and don't give up, because your service really, really matters. God bless you guys.